Rob Martwick, and I'm coming to you from my office here in Springfield, Illinois, at our state capitol. And today was a very important day in our legislative calendar. Today is the day when the governor presents his budget to us. And as many people are aware, that Illinois has had some budgeting problems over the years, but none quite so much as the last 3 years since Governor Rauner took office. So today's an important day. 2 weeks ago, he laid out his vision for Illinois, and we talked about that a little bit. But today, he talks about the nuts and bolts of how we move the state forward on a financial basis, how we get a budget. So I want to talk to you about exactly what he talked about. And I've outlined some stuff here on the board. Number one, he talked about that it was time for Illinois to finally have a balanced budget, which I couldn't agree with more. In fact, the words that he used very powerfully were, it's time that Illinois not spend any more than what we have. Stop spending more than what we have. And I have to tell you, I agree 100%. Number two, he said it is also time for Illinois to finally act comprehensive pension reform and save this taxpayers' money. Again, could not agree more. I think it is time that we come up with some constitutional pension reform measures that will save the state money. Number three, he said we need to increase funding for education. And not just funding for K through 12 education, he said we need to increase funding for higher education. Once again, we are in complete agreement. It's amazing. And finally, well, not finally, but he said we need to lower taxes. And as many people are aware, he's been talking about how the tax increase that we passed last year in a bipartisan fashion was wrong, and that he was going to reduce it back to the 3.75% from the 4.95% that it is currently. And finally, he talked about one other thing that we'll get to, which is the Thompson Center and the Northwest Side Veterans Home. So, all in all, you'd have to say to yourself, oh, that's a pretty good budget proposal. But then you'd have to look a little bit deeper. So let's talk about the balanced budget first of all. Let's start with the fact that this is a governor who 3 years in a row has not proposed anything that even comes close to resembling a balanced budget. In fact, certain parts of his budget were as much as $6-7 billion out of balance per year. He's also the governor who said, let's not spend any more than what we have, and yet he has spent more state dollars in excess of revenues than any governor in the history of the state of Illinois, racking up approximately $16 billion of unpaid bills that all of us, as taxpayers, get to pay back. But hey, it's always a good time to change your tune and start working right. So let's see if what he says is let's not spend any more than what we have. Let's keep that theme in mind as we analyze his budget. So let's talk about pension reform. So the governor laid out what he believes is the answer to our pension solutions here in the state level. And his answers are, in a nutshell, funny that I should use that, a shell game. Okay? What he's saying is that from now on, instead of the state paying the normal cost of pensions, the annual normal payment of pensions, that we should shift this onto the local school districts and to our state universities. This would save the state approximately $1.4 billion a year. He wants to shift that at a cost of about a quarter of it, so over 4 years, shift a portion. So it's about $350 million a year. $350 million per year, and this is important, that would be shifted from the state's responsibility onto the local school districts, which is also interesting because, well, how would they absorb that, right? Over the course of the 4 years, as you can see, this would amount to about $1.4 billion, which is exactly the cost. So we increase this by $350 million a year, and we increase the cost to local governments. Well, how do they offset? Well, they offset that with tax increases. This is the same governor, by the way, who's been screaming that our taxes, property taxes, are too high, but this would absolutely cause an increase in property taxes. There's no way around it, especially over the course of 4 years. $1.4 billion property tax increase. Which brings me to the next step, because he wants to increase funding for education. In fact, he wants to increase funding for education by K through 12. Oh, yeah, that's right. $350 million per year. So now you see the shell game. So we'll spend $350 million more, and we'll shift the cost right onto the school districts, which means no gain whatsoever. But there's another part of this, right? So we just passed a bill, as many of you are aware, a funding reform bill, which changed the way that we fund K through 12 education, and it's to provide equity, right? And everyone held these big celebrations. Hey, we provided equity. We did not provide equity until we spent $3.5 billion a year more on education. Well, we didn't have $3.5 billion to spend, so we said we'd increase funding by $350 million a year. The problem is that $350 million a year gets distributed to a formula to the schools that are most in need. That's not a problem. That's actually a good thing. But when you shift the pension reform, when you shift the normal cost of pensions, well, that's going to hit the schools that are not going to get the increase in funding. So one group of schools is going to get increase in funding for relief, and the others are going to get a huge cost on their pensions. And so you're going to see a massive tax increase. Where? In the areas that are already paying the highest property taxes are going to see their property taxes go up. So if you live in McHenry County or Lake County, I feel bad for you, but you got a big property tax coming. Compliments of the governor. He also said we should increase funding for higher education, which is fascinating to me, because this is the same governor in his very first year who proposed a cut of 37% funding for higher education. Almost wholesale eliminated MAP grants, which of course is tuition assistance, which gets spent on higher ed, and now he's calling for an increase in higher education. But here's the great part. He is increasing spending in higher education to the same amount that he's pushing the pension reform cost onto them. So once again, no change. All of this, though, he says, with these pension reform measures, will allow us to lower taxes. And this is the big one, because as you've heard, he's going to lower it from 4.95 to 3.75. He's been telling every editorial board, every newspaper, that the tax increase we passed was ridiculous, it was wrong, it was bad, and he was going to get rid of it. So today, he proposed a tax of Actually, he didn't propose that tax. He proposed losing it from 4.95 to 4.7. Well, that's a little bit of a difference there. Which is interesting, because this is the same governor that vetoed the 4.95% tax. Did he offer a 4.75% tax? Nope. He vetoed it, and he has spent the entire year walking around telling everybody how it was the wrong thing to do, and now he's saying that what we need is a 4.7% tax. Which sounds to me like he's saying that he was wrong and we were right. It sounds to me like what he's saying was that there was no way to balance the budget on 3.75%. That you needed a tax increase to do it. Now he's going to quibble by 0.25% now and say that we overtaxed by 0.25%, which you can argue about, and I would say that he's wrong. But this is the same governor who said we didn't need a tax increase and is now saying, yep, yeah, actually we did need a tax increase. So it's fine. It's good to see him finally owning up to his own mistakes. It would be nice if he did it in a better manner than this. So there's some other interesting things to notice about this. Let's go back to this balanced budget. Don't spend any more than you have. Today the governor bragged about the fact that every year under his administration we have increased spending for education. Every year he has bragged that we have increased funding for education. But it's the same governor who refused to actually adopt the tax increase that would be required to pay for it, which is why we didn't have balanced budgets. So we have a shell game. We are moving money around. We are playing with minor changes in rates. We are creating a minuscule saving, a minuscule 0.25% savings, so that we can force the highest property tax in the history of the state of Illinois onto the property taxpayers of Illinois. And we are undoing a funding reform that took years and years and years to achieve, and that the governor himself came to the city of Chicago, had a press conference with Mayor Emanuel. They hugged, they were arm in arm, and they celebrated this very joyous bill signing where they signed the education funding bill that Rauner didn't want to pay for. And now he's saying, months later, that no, that was all a mistake and it's time to redo it. This bill will cost Chicago Public Schools millions of dollars a year in an additional cost. $223 million a year would strip right out of the classrooms of the Chicago Public Schools. It's a shell game. It's a joke. It's not real. It's not what we should be doing. We should be talking about financial realities and solving our problems. Last one, the Thompson Center and the Veterans Home. So the governor once said, well, it's time for us to finally sell the Thompson Home, or the Thompson Center, the building downtown, which actually brought about some chuckles in the chamber today, which is interesting because Governor Rauner, more than any other governor I've seen, has found a way to elicit laughs from the General Assembly. So he's demanded the sale of the Thompson Center for 3 years now. For 3 years, he said, we need to sell the Thompson Center. And for 3 years, the General Assembly has said, okay, if it's important to you, we'll do it. Do I think it's a good idea? No, I don't think it's ever a good idea to sell an asset for short-term cash. We saw that in the city of Chicago when we sold the parking meters, and then all the money was used up and we had nothing left. We have a ton of state agencies that are in that building that are there rent-free, and they're all going to have to start paying millions of dollars of rent. So you're not going to save the money that you think you're going to save. You're going to sell an asset. It makes no sense to me. But hey, you got to compromise, and I'm for compromise. So for 3 years, the governor said, hey, we got to sell the Thompson Center. And we've said, okay, let's sell the Thompson Center. What has he done to actually market and sell the Thompson Center? You guessed it, not a thing. The last one is especially important to me, and it's something that really got under my nerves today. I confess that I almost acted in a manner that would have been unbecoming my office when the governor said that it's finally time to build the Veterans Home on the northwest side of the city of Chicago. For any of you who know me, this is right in the middle of my district. It's in Senator Mulro's district. And for the last 4 years, we've been fighting to get the construction of this Veterans Home done. And it hasn't been done because one person has refused to sit down and negotiate and balance a budget like it's his responsibility to do, and that's Governor Rauner. So the idea for him to say that he's created this huge problem and now he's going to ride in and fix the problems that he created is the most silly thing I've ever heard in my life, and he ought to be ashamed that he had the gall to stand up before the General Assembly and claim that he was going to finally finish the Veterans Home. That Veterans Home should have been finished a decade ago, and the last 4 years that it sat there a rotting shell is a nothing but a pockmark on your legacy, Governor. Shame on you, and shame on you for politicizing it and trying to take credit over it. I'm ashamed of him. It should get done, and we're going to get it done. But if you put us into another budget impasse and stop the funding, we will know whose problem it is, whose fault it is, and we will hold you accountable, Governor. We will hold you accountable. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the governor's budget. It is a bit better than what it's been in the past because it actually makes mathematical sense. Unfortunately, it's nothing more than a shell game. It's nothing more than shirking in order to try and save money on income taxes. It's forcing a big property tax. So it's just moving the money around and pushing it on someone else. It does not solve our problems. We need to find real budget answers to our problems, and we're only going to do that when we start being honest. That's what you get from me when I talk about these things. I give you the honest truth. Whether you like to hear it or not, you'll find it here. And we'll keep working to solve the problems. Thank you for watching. As always, feel free to comment, criticize, complain. You can do it right here on my Facebook page. You can send me a message. You can reach out to me at repmartwick@gmail.com. I look forward to interacting with you, and I look forward to a little common sense and straight talk and common sense solutions and actually fixing Illinois' problems. See you next time.